North Carolina is one of the states where Republicans did not do as well as they wanted to in this past election. Yes, Trump did still win the state of North Carolina, which I think was the thing they most cared about. He won by about 3 points in the presidential race in North Carolina. But even as Trump won the presidential race there, the Republican candidate in North Carolina for governor, he lost that race in the state of North Carolina. The Republican candidate lost the lieutenant governor's race in North Carolina. The Republican candidate lost the attorney general's race in North Carolina. The Republican candidate lost the Secretary of State's race in North Carolina. Also, the Republican candidate to be state schools chief. This is a race I was particularly keeping my eye on. The Republican candidate lost that race in North Carolina, too. The reason I was watching that one closely is because that was the race where the Republican candidate for schools chief said she wanted a pay-per-view public televised execution of former President Barack Obama. She also demanded the execution of President Biden, Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer, Anthony Fauci, a former New York governor, the current North Carolina governor, a member of Congress from Minnesota. Also, she wanted to execute Bill Gates. Honestly, it was a lot from her, but she was the Republican Party's nominee for superintendent of public schools for the state of North Carolina this year. And she lost that election, along with almost all the Republican candidates for statewide office in North Carolina. So, yes, in North Carolina this year, Trump won the presidential race, but Republicans lost almost everything else in the state. Heading into this election, North Carolina Republicans held a supermajority in that state legislature. But in this election, they lost that supermajority. Democrats made enough inroads in that state legislature this year, in this election, that Republicans in North Carolina no longer have a supermajority that allows them to override the veto, for example, from the governor. In the face of that oncoming change, Republicans took this bill making various changes to the laws of dentistry. They took the laws of dentistry bill and they turned it into something very much not that, which is probably good news for drunken dentists, bad news for mannequins. But it's also really big news, big audacious news for what Republicans are apparently trying to do in North Carolina on their way out the door. This is footage from the North Carolina state legislature, people being cleared out of the gallery in the state legislature for protesting against what the Republicans are trying to do with this bill that started off a dentistry bill and that has turned into something much more radical. Republicans took this laws of dentistry bill, they gutted it, they took out all the dentist stuff. They then decided they would call it their hurricane relief bill. You remember all the horrible storms in western North Carolina right before the election. They said it would be their hurricane relief bill, but what the bill actually does is it changes the state government in North Carolina. So all the state government positions that are about to be held by Democrats will have their power stripped away from them. The governor of North Carolina, for example, will no longer be allowed to appoint judges as he sees fit. Under this new bill, he will literally be required in certain circumstances to appoint judges that have been approved explicitly by the state Republican Party. The state Republican Party has to approve the Democratic governor's judicial picks. The Attorney General under this bill will not be allowed to oppose anything that is done by the Republicans in the state legislature, even if the Attorney General thinks it's against the laws of the state. Power over the administration of elections in North Carolina would inexplicably, under this bill, it would inexplicably be moved wholesale into the office of the state auditor. The state auditor being in charge of elections? Why would Republicans change North Carolina state law so the state auditor is suddenly the person in charge of elections? Oh, because state auditor is the one race that Republicans won this year in North Carolina.
State auditor candidate Dave Bollock, he said, I'm only in politics for you, sir. Where is Dave? Anybody that would save, Dave, if you say that, and do you mean that? If you mean that, I'm for you all the way. He has my endorsement.
I'm only in politics for you, sir. Imagine, I'm only in politics to serve you, sir, to serve Donald Trump. That's the only reason I'm running for office, the only reason I'm interested in politics at all. I am here to serve you as an individual. That is the one Republican that won his race in North Carolina state government in a statewide race this year. But because they've just got this one guy in statewide office, the auditor, Republicans just rewrote the laws of the state so that that will be the guy who's in charge of the state's elections, even though the state auditor job has nothing to do with elections whatsoever. It's like putting the dog catcher in charge of the water department. There's just no connection at all, but he is the one Republican, and so now he'll be the elections guy. This is what they have done with the dentistry bill. They hollowed out the dentist stuff, and this is what they've done since the election. And the consequence of that, well, one of the consequences thus far, is that North Carolinians have been turning up at the state legislature, filling the gallery in the legislature, shouting down the Republicans while they've been forcing through this last minute, after the election, hijack the dentistry bill to try to make sure they can stay in power even after they've been voted out. To stay in power in the administration of state government and the judiciary, also to control future elections, right? Because relying on the votes of the people of North Carolina is clearly not a winning strategy of them, so they're trying to work around